And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're going to be taking a look at a game called Dungeon Venture. Now, Dungeon Venture is a fantasy dungeon crawl board game. Now, there is a decent amount of dungeon crawl board games out in the market. There's not a lot of simple ones out there. I mean, I love Descent. Descent 2.0 is a fantastic game, but there's really a lot going on involved with that game. I mean, it's super fun. I'm always looking for the next hero quest. I mean, the Dungeons & Dragons board game did a good job, but I was hoping that Dungeon Venture would do it. I don't mind the dungeon crawl theme. I actually enjoy it, but I'm looking for something different, something unusual, something to elevate it above generic fantasy. Does this game do the trick? Let's take a look. In this game, each player plays a hero, or one player plays a dungeon master, bad guys. So you might be someone like Narana the Wizard. And here we have Snick the Thief, who's an agile human who strikes from their shadows. Your thirsty daggers rarely miss their target. Then we have Storm the Barbarian, who is under the impression that bad guys will never swing at any part of her body, except for the very small parts covered with armor. And then we have Vardok the Fighter, who is a bold dwarven fighter and heavily armored, blah, blah, blah. All right, now, each of these guys has stats up here on the top. The foot number here is how far they move. That's how many hit points they have. This is the number and color of the dice they roll in the attack. This is the number and color of dice they roll in defense, and that's the number of dice they would roll when dealing with magic. They have a spot here if they play spells. This is where they put them. Since he only has one spell die, he can only put one card here, as opposed to the wizard, who has 3 spell dice and therefore can play 3 spells. Then there's also a spot to put your equipment that you got, and a spot here to put hit points as you take them and are dying. Players will take a stand-up counter, and I'm not going to say a lot of kind things about this game. I'm just going to give you guys a heads up on that now. But I can't really criticize using stand-up counters. I know miniatures are expensive, so this doesn't bother me that much. But there is stand-up counters. Now, it does kind of bother me that the counters are hard to see. They have this giant black border here, and you can't see the people very well. It's very difficult to differentiate between the good guys and the many, many, many bad guys. But anyhow, so you're going to be moving around the board, and there is a book of dungeons, and I don't want to really spoil it for you, but I'm going to. And in this adventure, it will show you how to set up the dungeon, and you only go in one room at a time. There is seriously one line of background for each dungeon. But it also tells you what monsters and things that will show up in the dungeons as you go through them. And well, that's basically it. So players will set up, and they'll be moving around the board in their turn. And they have different actions where they can move, they can open treasure chests, they can search for traps, which you might as well do because there's traps, but all you have to do to find a trap is basically just search for it. There's different things, like there's a coffin, and then doors also come in this game. You have open and closed doors, which also will be on stands to go in the next room, and then the bad guys will show up. Now, combat's pretty simple. When I attack somebody, I will roll my attack dice. Let's say I have 4 green attack dice. I've done 1 hit. Their defense is 2 blue and a red. They block 2, no damage. Let's say they had rolled for attack, so 2 to 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. I would take 1 damage and place a damage counter on my sheet. If you're fighting a bad guy, you probably would kill him. Now, the way this game works is at the beginning of the game, you have these initiative cards for each of the heroes. You'll shuffle these together, and that's how you determine initiative. As more monsters come into the game, you will add their initiative cards to the deck for zombie and boss and skeleton and boss and kobold and orc and ogre. And so you'll add those to the game. Then there's a separate card for when you are fighting with them. When it's their turn for initiative, it shows their stats, how far they move. And by the way, did you know the orcs are green-skinned monsters with protruding fangs and a fearsome jagged scimitars? But anyhow, these dice are different. The green ones have hit symbols on only 2 sides. The blues have it on 3 sides, and the red have it on 4 sides. so that it allows for different things to happen. As the game will progress, you will get treasures. These treasures are going to take the form of different spells. So here are some of the spells that this game comes with: Major Heal and Pass Wall and True Strike. And there's even a magic missile in the game. You also can pick up potions: Potion of Cure, Potion of Defense, Potion of Mana Cure. These are one-time use, which can heal you or do different things. You can find gold that if you are a hardy person who wants to play this game multiple times in a row, you can go through campaign save gold to buy things such as Magic Talisman, Magic Armor, a two-handed sword, the aptly named Shield, Magic Boots, and Bow, all those which give you things like ranged attack or extra 1 to movement, etc. If you get through the dungeon and find the final boss dude, you can fight him. Each of the bosses has different things, but you will occasionally die. If that happens, your essence shows up and you basically float around until someone takes you to a shrine and heals you. If you're fighting the final boss dude, then when you die for good. However, every time you do get healed, every time your essence is healed, the bad guy gets to draw an event card, and these can be traps, or he can play these to make you miss. So you don't want to get hurt too badly because you're giving your opponent more things that he can do. And so that's essentially the game. It's bad guys versus good guys. There is a lot of pieces in the game. These are the tokens for hit points, and there's card treasures for the bad guy too, because when you fight the bad guy boss, he might have fire rays or magic missiles or potions that he can use. Most of the bad guys are one-hit wonders. When they get hit, they're dead, but the bosses often have multiple hit points. If you make it through the whole dungeon, the heroes win. Otherwise, the dungeon master wins. You can tell by my boundless enthusiasm how much oh my goodness. Okay, folks. Here is the #1 problem with Dungeon Venture, and it has multiple problems. But the #1 problem with Dungeon Venture, by a mile, is it is so generic. We are talking like this is, I don't know if it's possible that this is actually a themeless dungeon crawler. Okay, it's not themeless, but come on. You are playing with warrior fights orc with sword. Wizard has magic missile. I mean, there is nothing new. They don't even try. They don't try to give the game any flavor. It's there's a one line like, "Or you're fighting a wizard, valabuba," and that's about it. And all the monsters are the same monsters from everyone. These guys look like they stepped out of the manual from the first Dungeons and Dragons game. The equipment is boring, not to mention totally random if you get it or not. But I mean, the dice, they all have hits on them. There's nothing really to differentiate. The only hero who feels different than the rest is the wizard, and that brings us to our second problem. The wizard is kick butt compared to the other ones. Wizard spells and casting spells just blow people away. Everyone else, you go in there and you get fought by zombies, and maybe you'll beat them and maybe they'll beat you. How do we know who wins? Total luck. Total luck. Because you get swarmed by the monsters, there's not much you can do. You move around, and it's not like you have special cool powers you can do. You just hit them with a sword a lot. Wow. I am willing to forgive the components. Components are medium quality. They're not fantastic. They're not bad. They're medium quality. I'm willing to forgive them. And I will roll my eyes at the totally generic and sexist artwork in the game. I will say whatever, but I cannot ignore the generic theme. I'm sorry. Orcs and zombies and skeletons. Even Hero Quest, which had the same things. It had orcs and zombies and skeletons. Had a really cool story behind it. And had neat weapons you could buy. And the characters felt different. At least better than this one. This is lame. I mean, if you're not a fan of dungeon crawlers, you're not going to like this game anyway. But if you are a fan of dungeon crawlers, you're not going to like this game. I can't imagine anybody, even for kids, I'd rather hunt down a copy of the Dungeons & Dragons board game or an old copy of Hero Quest and show it to them. Or just say, hey, let's man up and learn to play Descent. Or multiple. I'd play Tomb over this one. This is just not a good game in any sense of the word. I wanted to like it. I thought it had... See, I'm even struggling to say anything interesting about the game because it was just all the same. Open door, loot, chest, roll around, fight. Blah, 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 blah.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!